And we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm really excited for tonight's broadcast on StreamYard as we host Dr. Layla Goushey. I am Nina Shaman-Dajani, one of the founders of the Arab American Educators Network, which was founded earlier this year in 2020. It's a brand new network of educators from across the country, along with Dr. Sausan Jabir, Sara Saeed, and the amazing Abir Shanawi, who is working behind the scenes to make sure that our pop-ups and our questions and our technology is working tonight. So I just want to give a special shout out to Abir for doing that. We started a really cool new program called Changemaker of the Month. And one of the reasons why we started the Arab American Educators Network was to not only network Arab American educators from across the country and keep us connected in different ways by sharing resources and articles and knowledge and just being a support system for each other, but also to learn from each other and highlight the amazing Arab American educators that we have in our communities and throughout the country. And tonight we get to do that with our Changemaker of the Month series. And last month we hosted our first Changemaker of the Month, Ms. Shadia Salem, who was speaking about her experience as an ELL director. And today we have Professor Dr. Layla Goushey here with us from St. Louis. I am live from Tinley Park, Illinois, which is in the southwest suburbs of Chicago. And for those of you that don't know me, I am Dr. Nina Shaman-Dajani, and I am an assistant dean at Moraine Valley Community College in the southwest suburbs of Chicago. I also teach Arab American and Middle Eastern Studies at two universities, St. Xavier and at UIC, University of Illinois, Chicago, when the opportunity is there. And I will be teaching this fall at St. Xavier, so really looking forward to that. And speaking of teaching, next week, Layla is going to be starting her semester in a very different format, as most educators across the country. And to tell you just a little bit about Layla, she is a professor at St. Louis Community College in St. Louis, and she has a doctorate in adult education. Is that correct? And she's a professor of English. And I want to start off by asking Layla a little bit about what her everyday job looks like. As a professor, what does it look like? Can you describe it to us?
Sure. And first, Nina and Abir, thank you. And thank you to Arab American Educators Network for inviting me. I'm very honored. What does it look like? At all times, it is student-centered. That's first. I would say, when even before I'm on campus, my routine up until March, my routine was, wake up, what's on email, which students might have contacted me, since the last time I checked. And then, going in, basically it's a basic teaching schedule of, classroom teaching of composition. I mainly teach composition courses, although I also teach literature and an interdisciplinary course titled Topics in Arab Culture. I also teach that course. But, go in, have my office hours, contribute to the department through committee work. So, but I would say what it really looks like is a lot of interpersonal interaction with students. And my campus, it's a large district, so we have several campuses, but my campus is closer into St. Louis City, and it's a very diverse campus, a lot of dynamic things happening all the time.
That's awesome. I can imagine, as I also work on a very large community college campus in Illinois, which is very diverse and part of a large district. So I can completely relate to you and I can imagine what your campus looks like. So we'll have to do a swap or come and visit each other on each other's campuses one day.
Yeah. And then, I'm sorry. This reminds me, I'd like to show one of the photos that I brought.
Sure.
because that would be the first photo of students that I've worked with. And this is a special photo to me because I coordinated the global education studies on my campus. And basically what that was everything from helping faculty design study abroad courses to setting up seminars, and also, again, a lot of interaction with students. And we had a global studies club. But these two students were both student workers who had originally just come into, because they wanted to work on campus, and maybe not specifically wanted to work in global studies, but we developed such a fun team with such good, good experiences for those students. One student is from St. Louis and the other is from a country in the Swana region. And so we had, they had some great ideas to share from different perspectives. And I think that's what is great about educational institutions for me. It can bring a lot of varied people together, to find common interests and learn from each other. So,
Absolutely. I'm sure you learn as much from your students as they learn from you.
absolutely, yes.
Yes. And we know at a community college campus, we have all ages and backgrounds of students and different socioeconomic backgrounds, students between the ages of 17 to 87.
Yes.
So you learn a lot from your students, and I'm sure it's a really not only a rewarding job, but something that you gain knowledge from on a daily basis.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your family origins and how that inspired your career in education?
Sure. My father is Palestinian and was displaced during the Nakba, 1947-48, with his siblings and my grandmother. My grandfather had already passed from natural causes during that time. So he started out as a 13, 14-year-old, never finished high school, but learned a skill as a tailor, eventually coming to the U.S. and met my mother, who is Caucasian American. But, so I understand, I think, struggle in terms of education and educational opportunities. My mother, at the time that until I entered college, my mother also had just had a high school education. So I went into college not knowing anything, not even understanding what college was about. I just knew people went,
Mm-hmm.
and so but I said, I'm going because people go and I want to improve myself. And I also said, I know I don't know much. I don't know what's going on. I would hear all the discussions about politics and other people's, and I wanted to know more. So, but ultimately, once I was in college for a couple of years, my mother actually went back, started at a community college in Dallas, and eventually earned her master's.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, and then my father started taking automotive courses. He was an excellent tailor, owned a shop for about 20 years, and then started taking automotive courses at a community college, and ultimately opened a garage that my brother still owns. And he and my brother opened the garage together. So I've always really felt kind of attached to that, to the student that may not have had mentors or may not really understand what education can do for them.
Absolutely.
And the first generation student. So that, as I did finally make my way through my master's, I'll make a long story very short. I realized as I worked with a Greek professor on my campus, on my university campus, that I would miss working with students. He had a lot of responsibilities outside of the classroom. So I decided, for me personally, I felt like the community college was more where I fit because I wanted that interaction with students.
Mhm.
And to see people grow and to grow myself as well.
Absolutely. Fascinating story about your parents and both of their journeys, educational journeys. I mean, that is something that is so beautiful for you to have shared. Thank you so much. We do appreciate that. And really, I can tell how that's informed your journey as an educator and also your perspective as a community college educator specifically. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
And you're continuing the legacy of promoting education for youth and first generation students. So we applaud you for that. You know, it's not only your professorship that keeps you very busy and teaching, you are also involved in various organizations. You're an editor for Sukun magazine, is that correct?
Yes.
And also partake in various community service events and organizations. But one of the academic organizations that you are involved in is the Arab American Studies Association. And I'm also a member of the Arab American Studies Association. It's a wonderful organization, but you are on the board of that organization. So can you tell us a little bit more about your involvement with the association, and then also anything else you'd like to say about some of the extracurricular activities, whether they're academic or non-academic, that you'd like to share with the audience?
Sure. You know, I've only recently become fully involved on the board of the Arab American Studies Association. I had followed them for years. I presented at their last conference in 2017 and had followed them before that. But because of, our careers can go in so many different directions, and I was spending a lot of time building my own career and building curriculum at my institution.
Yeah.
Working in global studies helped me focus and bring in speakers that related to Arab American studies. Um, but as funding ran out for global studies, because that's a challenge we have right now,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of thinking about how can I still contribute to things I really care about. And I realized while I can continue in other ways at the college, I can move things to the community. I can work in the community on cultural projects. And I want to see Arab American studies and other related projects succeed. And so I'm the web coordinator for Arab American studies. And I am in awe of some of the other folks on the board and the spectacular, wonderful research they're doing, the lectures they provide, the articles they write, and the conversations that are had, even over email at this point.
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
I see it as helping support the work of building our culture as Arab Americans, and also helping others to understand the Swana region in general.
Yes, absolutely. And for those that might be unfamiliar with the acronym SWANA, it stands for Southwest Asia and North Africa. Some people also refer to the region as the MENA region, Middle Eastern and Middle East and North Africa. So just in a broader sense, SWANA is, I think, a more politically correct acronym to use, if you will. Would you agree, Layla?
Yes, I did a lot of thinking about that because I have, for years, of course, many of us refer to it as MENA or the Middle East. But as I did start thinking about how how language influences our perspective, I realized that, as we know, the Middle East is really a British term, and defining the region in terms of geographically where it lays in regard to the British
Correct.
area. Yeah.
Yes.
So I did start thinking maybe Southwest Asia and North Africa for me is a way of decolonizing. And, I've asked a lot of people from the region what they prefer. And I get a lot of different answers, and some say, El Sharq al Assad, the Middle East, that's
Yeah.
so
There
that's
are lots of
still a
opinions.
discussion.
Yeah, there are lots of opinions. We might have to host a discussion about that. But I
Exactly.
understand because I teach a class at a university called Middle Eastern American Issues, and I didn't name the class. This is a class that was on the books well before I arrived at that particular university, and um, I start the class by talking about the term Middle East and what it means and how it came about. So it is something that we need to continue to work on, is decolonizing the language that we use.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about students. And the first thing you mentioned regarding your everyday work is that it's very student centered. And you were sharing a story about global education and some of the students that worked on campus that you were close to and that you worked with. Can you tell us a little bit about other things that you're doing to help marginalized students, marginalized communities? And we know that St. Louis is a very diverse area, that the community college that you work at is very diverse. And so you may have Arab American students and students from other marginalized communities. So what are you doing to help and support them?
Um, Through my career, one thing that has always interested me is working with helping people become literate. So literacy learning is very important to me. And in fact, even as a 20-year-old, I would volunteer with a literacy organization in Texas. And that's where I really started first thinking maybe I would like to teach, because there were migrant farm workers and many people out of foster care that needed to learn literacy. So as I got into my career, I've really chosen developmental education as a specialty. And what developmental education is, it helps adults who need to improve their literacy, in my case, or their numeracy, uh, to become college ready. There are an enormous number of people who graduate from high school who still do not have the college level literacy or numeracy skills. And that's not entirely their fault. That, in fact, it's not their fault at all. It is because of educational lack of funding for
Right.
education. It is the food deserts they're living in as they grow up. It's due to issues with foster care and other family issues. So that is a specialty. Not anyone can just walk into a developmental classroom, I believe, because there's
I
a
agree.
there's a very psycho-emotional angle to it. You have to help people believe that they can succeed. That's
Mhm.
it. And I think that circles back to my own experience as someone just entering college. I mean, it is very intimidating to walk into this big building, this institution. Everyone else seems to know what's going on. I want to be there for that student, especially students who are my age, who have just found the courage to maybe come back and pursue a certificate, or change their career. And so that's one way, in the classroom and as part of my career, but also, outside, on campus. I host. I'm actually the sponsor of the Muslim Student Association.
Wow, that's great.
That yes. So and we have a wonderful president at the moment who actually has a great video project she's working on gathering interviews to collect advice on how to live life in your 20s. So she's a go-getter too, but there are many, and it's just a way of mentoring students.
Hmm.
But I'd say in general, how I try to join in with, I'm a joiner. If there's a meeting, unfortunately, I will, show up. If there's something going on, if I can, I will try to be there. And so So through that, we've done things like go to maybe a homeless shelter. I've worked with other faculty who have their own charities and have, have their own clubs. And so there's a lot of ways of helping. We built a food pantry. I was, helped work with that.
Well, you sound like you have done it all, really. I mean, I, as an assistant dean of a department that houses developmental education, first of all, I can attest to your comment regarding not anybody can walk into developmental ed classroom, and it does take a very special instructor that understands the student population and has patience and sympathizes for their backgrounds and their literacy levels. And so I completely agree with you on that. And also, as an advisor of a student organization, I know how much work that is. And so for you to be doing that simultaneously as a faculty member and all of your other committee work and involvement, I mean, really, you've delved into many areas that, I mean, so many faculty members unfortunately sometimes avoid just because it's extra volunteer work. So I think also as an Arab American, being that professor that does do that, that goes the extra mile, you're setting an example for other Arab American educators. So again, we applaud you for doing that. And that's why you're a change maker. And that kind of segues into the next question that I had. And it is similar, you've already touched on kind of the gratifying part of your job. It's clear that you do feel reward from the work that you do, but what does it mean to be a change maker from your perspective, Layla?
I think it's the most important part of it is to try, have an idea and then try to make that happen. I think that sometimes, we think change making is like the big things, but really it's just, I don't know if this will work, but let me put this idea out there. Let me devote a little bit of energy, and it can pick up momentum. And there are times when maybe the idea, the hope for change does not.
Yeah.
But I've learned over time that sometimes it's kind of like that, just like that one drop of water, and then the
ripple effect.
The ripple effect, where maybe we discussed something 2 years ago, and then find now 2 years later, it's starting to come to pass. So not everything is going to happen right away, and I think that's part of change making too. It's realizing that you can keep nudging things along. Not everything has to be a big splash, and sometimes it just needs for conditions to be right.
Oh, those are words of wisdom. We love that, and I think that if there's any newer educators that are watching, that's something that's really important, because I think that many people go into teaching or into education in general, whether it's administration or being in the classroom, wanting to make changes right away. That's something I had to learn, that it does take time and you have to be patient, and eventually those small incremental changes will have a larger effect or influence. So I really do appreciate you saying that and sharing those words, because it is true. Are there people or individuals, past, present, or from your family or friends or in your communities, or people that you've studied that have influenced you in some way or another, that were change makers that influenced your career?
Well, I do want to say I do think both of my parents were change makers. I think on my father's side, to have essentially been apprentice as a tailor at 14, and ultimately bring his entire family here, his siblings, except for one sister. And then my mother was very much influenced by the values of the 60s, I would say, and just had a very open mind, which also influenced me. But in terms of my career, there are two pictures I wanted to show. First, we can show the picture number 4 of Munir. Oh, Munir and Katie Bayou, thank you. I'm actually, these two individuals were who I did my, who I'm doing research on
Wow.
for my Arab American Studies project, I guess. I did a partial presentation on them in 2017, and I'm still working. I have filed a FBI Freedom of Information Act to help me with the research. But Munir Bayoud was a Lebanese Christian Catholic who had been teaching in Jerusalem in 1948, and he saw, he saw fighting. He was outraged. Ultimately, he came to the U.S. He was a math professor at Southern Methodist University. Ultimately, he met his wife Katie, who was also a math teacher, but they were the community leaders of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And my father used to take me to every public lecture that Munir Bayoud would schedule. He invited Edward Said and members of the of different Arab American organizations and Arab organizations. He was a member of the Arab League, and invited dignitaries to come to Dallas. And so my father would always take me. So I always had this sort of, interesting intellectual influence, and also observed them as activists.
Mm-hmm.
And they were also the ones that if any new person came to town, especially students, graduate students or college students, they would put the word out, this person needs a car, or this person needs a place to live, or how can we help? So they were very much a center of gravity and big influences on me to understand how you can be both, have a professional life, professional intellectual life, and also a life as an activist. And I'd say, there's a picture number 3 I had brought that I had also thought to mention in terms of Arab American Studies. But this is a panel I served on just a couple of years ago in regard to the play Oslo. They held this play called Oslo, which is an award-winning play about the Oslo Peace Accords, and this panel was set up for Arab Americans, Palestinians, Israelis, and Jewish Americans to come together on this panel and discuss. And I think I was Munir Bayoud was there with me. That's what I wanted to say, along with my family and others I've known in my life. But just to, as I said, as global studies at my campus sort of went away for me, I wanted to start working in the community more and really playing that role that Munir Bayoud played, and Katie Bayoud as well. Katie was, an activist in her own right. She was president of ADC when ADC first emerged. So, I would say all of that has kind of come together for me with Arab American Studies and so on. And one thing I want to say to everyone, I'm sure there were community leaders all across this country, and I would like to recognize more of them. I know there were more Katie and Munir Bayouds out there.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, in terms of Arab American Studies, I think it would be great to remember them
Yes.
however we can.
Well, I think it's beautiful that you took time out to share a picture of them, and obviously they had a very large influence on your life and your perspective in terms of your not only your career, but also how you reflect on Arab American Studies and scholarship and activism. And I think that many times people didn't realize 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that you can be a scholar and an activist. And today it's very common to be call yourself a scholar activist, right? Or an activist scholar.
Right.
And so that's what you touched on. And you talked about the marriage of the two, being a scholar and being an activist. So let's talk a little bit about balancing being a scholar and an activist with your life as a mother, right? And having a family. How do you keep work-life balance? That's something that we're all trying to figure out. So do you have any words of advice, or would you like to share your perspective? I know that it's something that we can probably talk about all day. As every day it's a different type of struggle, especially in this remote working world. But what do you do to keep a work-life balance?
Well, I will. I have some thoughts on that. I wanted to say one more thing about the scholar activist.
Yes, please do.
Concept first, because that is actually something I have thought very deeply about, and I've actually done some private writing yet on that I haven't shared yet. But I think that in a situation like the panel I served on, or some of the other public lectures I've done, I think it's very important to recognize scholarship, to utilize scholarship, to provide the facts, and to maintain that sense of, I think, credibility, to be able to refer to our source, and so on. Activism to me is where you have a thesis, you have your point, you want to drive that point home, you want to enlighten people about that point. But I do think that there are two ends of a spectrum, and I'm still thinking that through. So I wanted to kind of say that I consider myself more of a scholar, although I've also been an activist. I'm also out there on the street, protesting as well. But in terms of work-life balance, I'm a perfectionist, and it does not, I do not achieve perfection at all.
Who does? I want to know who does.
Yeah, and so really, I kind of look at it in terms of long-term goals, short-term goals, daily goals, what needs to be put back in balance, what is achievable that I can put back in balance today. And that might be, washing the dishes. At the moment, we're remodeling some of our home. We just go with the flow. We live with what's there. But in terms of my kids, I always put my kids first. I did stay home with my kids. Actually, I taught part-time until they were 4 and 5 years old.
Adorable.
But when they were babies, I was still at home. I didn't really want a babysitter. I wanted to be with my kids. I wanted to do things. We read like thousands of books. I'm not exaggerating,
I believe it.
And so I wanted to show that picture of them at open mic night at my campus, one of the campuses I taught at. They both are very talented, and I'm not just saying that because I'm their mom, but no, they had their routine that they would do at open mic. But there were many times they came to campus with me. Basically, we did a lot together, from grocery shopping together to everything else. And so I think I'm pretty much of an attachment parent, in terms of, I think kids learn by observing, how we go about our lives, to the extent that that's possible. Of course, they're not in the classroom with me, but a casual event like open mic night is something that we did. And that reminds me, I'll show the other photo of open mic. That would be number 2 with me with the literary journal. I think that might have been the same night, but I think it's about work-life balance is about making sure people's needs are met. And that's the first goal, our family needs met, our basic needs met, the roof, the food in the refrigerator, are the bills paid. But then a lot of that other stuff, it can wait till the next day. Of course, you don't want, things to go totally wild, but I will spend like a day, just kind of trying to catch up on the house and what's going on. But I think it's more about setting goals and accepting for yourself what you can put away for another day, and who has needs, and how do we meet those needs first.
Yes. We needed that reminder. Thank you, Layla. There's always tomorrow. There's always tomorrow. So we want to wrap up here as to respect the time of individuals that are tuning in from across the country, and make sure that we are giving people time with their families tonight and for dinner and so on. And just if you can close by telling us a few, pieces of advice, a couple bullet points about what you would tell aspiring educators if you were speaking to an audience of aspiring educators. What would the advice be that you would give to them?
I'd say have a simple core goal, which as an educator, my thought would be being student centered, and also beyond that, in terms of building a career, I think it's important to stay current with professional development. We are in a time of transition and change. And I know we keep saying, when are we going back to normal? I think that it's going to be a new normal. I think with budgets going up and down as they are in education, there could be a lot of transition and change. So I think it's important to continue learning in our professions. I also think no matter if you're, no matter what level you're teaching, I think writing, continuing to write, or work on projects that are meaningful in your career can also help build your career. So yeah.
Very good advice. I'm glad that you shared that. And I think that it's important that you had noted the professional development piece. I mean, and also if you're an aspiring educator, a new educator, or you've been teaching for 20 years, you should still aspire to stay up with professional development, because we're always learning new things. And you're an example to all of us by showing us that once you're in the classroom, don't make it, your last stop. There's so many other things that you can get involved in, whether you're in a K through 12 educational setting or on a college campus, students that need support, whether it's through clubs and organizations or just mentoring. And you're a wonderful example of that, and a great example of who Arab American Educators Network is. And we do appreciate all of your activity with us. For those of you that are trying to find us and want to follow us, we are on Twitter and Facebook. So please, if you're an Arab American educator, find our Facebook page, Arab American Educators Network. And on Twitter, we are Arab American Educators. You can find us at Educators Arab. We also use the hashtag #YallaTeach. So shukran, shukran, shukran. As you can see across the bottom of the screen, we appreciate you taking the time out for us. Thank you to the viewers for tuning in, and thank you to our team, Abir, Sausan, and Sara, for helping make tonight happen, and for all of your hard work with our network. And thank you to everyone that's joined us as members. And we hope to connect with you again soon, Layla. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. I'm very honored.